Our last talk of the day, it will be a pre-recorded talk by Srinivasan on the theme of intersectionality within neurodiversity, autism and ADHD, communication, and race/ethnicity. Hari is a minimally speaking autistic and ADHDer who recently graduated from UC Berkeley, majoring in psychology and minoring in disability studies. At Berkeley, he was a lead instructor for a semester-long class on autism, was the first non-speaking president of a student org Spectrum at Cal, wrote for the Daily Californian, and was an RA at the University Psychology Labs, as well as the UC Berkeley Disability Lab. Hari was awarded the Paul and Daisy Soros Fellowship for New Americans, a prestigious scholarship which will assist him in pursuing a doctorate in neuroscience at Vanderbilt University, where he plans to conduct more research on autism. He also enjoys music, watching pro sports in addition to learning tennis. He loves creative writing, with some of his poems and other work winning awards, including a national award at Carnegie Hall. Hari is passionate about disability advocacy and is a board member of ASAN. Hari was featured on President Obama's Instagram campaign on the 30th anniversary of ADA.
Hi everyone. I graduated UC Berkeley and am currently a PhD student at Vanderbilt. I'm also autistic with limited speaking skills. However, my talking ability is starting to improve slowly as an adult, and I hope to get to conversational speech in a decade. This goes to show we are never too old to learn, progress and grow. So don't let anyone tell you otherwise. It saddens me to see all the divisions and groups within the autism community. I believe we all have a common goal and should work together instead.
Be kind where possible. It is always possible.
I believe we need to follow a dual-pronged approach that looks at both strengths-based opportunities and also challenges-based solutions. It's not an either-or. I will keep coming back to this point during my talk today. I will start with my own disabilities. I thought a lot about how to group my challenges and came up with 4 main areas: communication regulation, body regulation, health and emotion regulation. Bottom line, I'm significantly disabled and there is no sugarcoating it. And dealing with all this takes 90% of my time and effort. I am absolutely in a state of frustration and exhaustion most of the time. Everyone thinks communication is just about the speaking part, or using some other device or app. Communication is just the visible part of the iceberg. There is a lot more to the story. All these other areas are playing into what's going on with communication, so I will circle back to communication after talking about the other 3 areas. Body regulation. This one small phrase actually encompasses a huge range of issues, which is almost impossible to summarize, so I can touch on only some of them. All of which is bound to affect communication and functioning, of course. Issues with somatosensory body mapping means not having a good sense of where parts of my body are in space and time. My body can feel like driving a car with a loose steering wheel. You may attempt to turn the wheel, but are not sure if the car will go the way you want. Sensory dysregulation means I'm just at times overwhelmed with environmental input. Other terms at play are sensorimotor, proprioception, vestibular, interoception, alexithymia, and synesthesia. Fine motor skills impact my daily living skills and handwriting. Gross motor impact is in areas like left-right coordination. I have random, non-volitional, movement disorder like body movements, fluctuating between too much movement and too little movement. Then there is OCD. A core feature of autism diagnostic criteria is repetitive behaviors. But when autism stimming crosses a certain threshold, it becomes OCD, which is exhausting as it's out of your volitional control. I have an official dual diagnosis of ADHD. I have to almost run from point A to point B, rather than walk. I get easily distracted and am impulsive, even as the logical part of my brain is vexed. Here we go again. ADHD and autism in the same body can be a contradiction, as autism loves routine while ADHD loves change and novelty. The bottom line, I'm usually one clumsy, uncoordinated guy. There is only so much you can manipulate externally, so just accommodations don't always solve the issue. Health issues. This is a huge area which I will get back to later. I have a bunch of health issues, both diagnosed and undiagnosed due to diagnostic overshadowing. I don't live in a healthy body at all and live in a constant state of unease and discomfort. I wonder if these issues will worsen with age. Like I feel some of my involuntary body movements, magnified a lot as an adult compared to when I was a child. So what's going on? I worry if this will spiral into Parkinsonism in a decade or more. With all this going on, do you wonder at the prevalence of emotion regulation, extreme anxiety, mood swings and meltdowns in autistics like me? There is just so much going on in and around our body. I want to be around others, yet get so anxious simultaneously, so there is a lot of social anxiety. The flow of social conversations add to the unpredictability, especially if you are slow. Change and autism are not the best of bedfellows. What I notice in a lot of my peers is that by adulthood they either internalize as a state of apathy or externalize by acting out. Some have given up, like a peer who just sits in one place at their adult day program all day. It looks very much like apathy. I have to also wonder if it's due to them being heavily medicated. Others act out with complex and challenging behaviors which neither behavior therapy nor medication seems to resolve. Either way, our mental health is in absolute taters. I wish there were holistic solutions or precision meds that suit my physiology instead of a pharma cocktail for my unpredictable meltdowns that can leave you battered and traumatized. Current pharmaceuticals that most of us are on just seem to sedate us and shut down the prefrontal cortex that we need for functioning in society. That's why I call it communication regulation. Because all of these other areas impact communication. There are a lot of terms thrown around in the communication arena, like apraxia and aphasia. Whatever it is, the practical part is that my communication output is much slower than what I need. In the structured education arena, it's not easy, but you can somehow scrape through with accommodations and communication systems. I want to take a long-term view here. Even if you manage to access education, formal education itself will end at some point. What about in your 30s and 50s and beyond? Where it is a real problem is when you are trying to have social interactions. No one has that kind of patience. I'm going to live till 80. I will also get back to the point of what communication is about later on in my talk. As you can see, there is a lot going on in one single body. It's a lot to take and a lot to handle. Given all my issues, it's always been a challenge finding staffing, therapists, professionals, therapy and support. And all of these add up in terms of not just financial costs but also the toll on physical and mental health. Yes, our challenges need solutions, but we can't just be sitting inside a lockbox waiting for research even as we get older and older. We have only one life to live, which we want to live in dignity and peace and be included. Which brings us to the other prong, that of strength-based opportunities. This is super important and is what will move us towards inclusion and belonging for autistics across the spectrum and for neurodiversity. We need something to wake up to each morning, the chance to pursue our version of happiness and dreams, to learn, and maybe even get the chance to contribute. Strengths-based opportunities are key to inclusion and belonging. Let's look at examples in my life. Some of the inclusion enablers for me were access to communication, the opportunity of education, which in turn was enabled by supportive and empathic faculty and non-judgmental peers, and also the opportunity to contribute and involvement in enrichment opportunities. Moving on to education. I was in special education till grade 8 and had wondered if education was ever in the cards for me. The yellow special ed school bus led only to an adult day program. A full psych ed assessment at grade 8 in charter school placed me at grade 12 for math and college level for English, though I had never sat in a mainstream academic classroom. I took to calculus, biology and Shakespeare like a duck to water, though I did not enjoy history. I think for a lot of autistics, academics give a lot of predictability and structure, and this paradoxically makes academics seem less difficult to succeed in, compared to the vagaries of our autism challenges, which is like scaling Mount Everest. I graduated high school valedictorian along with a bunch of writing awards, including a gold medal I received at Carnegie Hall in New York, shown in the photo, and got published in an anthology with a foreword by Nobel laureate Elie Wiesel. Diving straight into a large university after high school seemed overwhelming, so I went to a smaller community college first. I highly recommend community colleges for autistics as a transition training ground where you get used to college expectations in a smaller space. The advantage of a small college was that the counselor knew all the instructors, so could steer me towards instructors who were very inclusive and supportive, which ensured success and built my self-esteem that I could survive college. That self-esteem part is very important. I want to segue a little into accommodations here. We tend to think of accommodations as static. Most academic accommodations are geared towards testing. But autism is 24/7, so needs constant tweaking to make it context-specific. But accommodations really hinge on the people, even more than anything on paper. Empathy and mindset matters. Sometimes small tweaks can make a huge difference in your success, like the one made by my biology 4A instructor for the lab exam. Instead of me walking from station to answer questions about the experimental setup at each station, she put the lab stations on a cart and wheeled each one to where I was sitting. She came up with this idea on her own. These are tweaks that don't make it to the official accommodations list. But what a huge difference in my success. Coming back to my journey. My next step was the 40,000 student campus of UC Berkeley. I was surrounded by non-judgmental peers, encouraging faculty, no one said no to anything I wanted to do, and doors of opportunities were not shut in my face. I was in an environment that encouraged students to be activists and strive for the greater good. I think of many of the things I've gotten to do as small pebbles that help widen ripples in the pond of change. One pebble was getting to write over 50 articles at the Daily Californian. To my immense surprise, my first article on autism received some 7,000 plus hits overnight. I started getting emails from New Zealand to Nigeria to France. Apparently people found what I was saying to be useful. Even disability studies faculty were reaching out saying I was putting the spotlight back on Berkeley in the disability rights movement. I was able to push for the very first disability special issue and also help run workforce accommodations workshops each semester for the Daily Cal staff. For most of my time in Berkeley, I was a lead student instructor for a class on autism. This was a for-credit, faculty-sponsored, but totally student-taught weekly class. I created all the content for the class, right from syllabus to topics, and slides, and arranged a variety of speakers and panels to include different perspectives. We covered a range of topics from disability law, social issues, stigma, medical issues, research, policy issues, across the lifespan, and across the entire spectrum. The actual teaching of the slide material and facilitating the speaker discussions was done in collaboration with one or more other non-disabled students each semester. With my level of disability challenges, it would have been a tall order to have taken on all the social nuances of the teaching in a classroom setting on my own. So you see, having limited speaking skills does not have to limit what you can do. The class grew from its initial enrollment of 17 to 50 students per semester. It even got a mention on President Obama's Instagram. I feel this class has been one of the most impactful things I got to do at Berkeley in influencing how my fellow students now and in the future will regard autism. After all, many of the students will go on to becoming the next generation of medical professionals, research scientists, lawyers, policymakers, educators, therapists, and other professionals at the decision-making table. They will hopefully pass on values like inclusion and non-discrimination against autistics to their children and the next generation. They will make sure that all autistics are included in the solutions and opportunities. For example, it felt so impactful to hear from a student in Europe who said that this class was influencing her current research work. I have enjoyed having international students in the class as that gives insights about autism in other countries. So I learned from the other students in the class as much as they learned from this class. I unexpectedly found myself nominated as president of the campus student org, Spectrum at Cal. So I thought, why not see this as an opportunity to add some more pebbles? Despite remote instruction forced on by the pandemic that year, we were able to increase outreach, collaborations, and start a new peer-to-peer volunteering program. I was also able to introduce Belonging Week in place of Acceptance Week. Belonging is an idea that is close to my heart. That's me wearing a shirt that was designed by our club, that says, "You belong," with two intertwined butterflies emerging out. The butterfly effect says a small local change can lead to profound and complex changes around the world. You are all part of the butterfly effect that will change the way autism and other disabilities are perceived and understood. I was a summer associate at Professor Victor Pineda's nonprofit, World Enabled, where I created 42 case studies of countries that had implemented UNCRPD, the United Nations Convention for Rights with People with Disabilities. Professor Pineda had been one of the youngest delegates, and draftees, at the initial convention in 2006. It was very educational for me personally to see perspectives and challenges faced by countries at a global level. I also headed team propaganda at the Makerspace UC Berkeley Disability Lab. Learning about other disabilities helped me better understand issues around autism. Socrates said that education is the kindling of a flame, not the filling of a vessel. Education for me had not been just about classrooms and exams. I love learning, I love knowledge and its application. These found their way into small pebbles. My classes with Professor Hinshaw and Professor Harvey fueled a talk on mental health at a local biomed conference as well as a paper on anxiety. Professor Walker's class translated into a talk on the search for restorative sleep in autism. As a Berkeley Haas scholar, it was awesome, pun intended, to do research on awe with Professor Keltner, who is an expert in the science of awe. I'm working to get 2 papers on awe and empathy to publication now. I just had to include this message from my hero, the legendary disability rights activist, Judy Heumann. The message serves as encouragement, motivation and inspiration. I am in such absolute awe and admiration of all the groundbreaking paths laid down by her generation, which enable my generation to avail of opportunities like higher education. I wrapped up my undergraduate at UC Berkeley with a heap of unexpected honors and awards. University medal finalist at a place like UC Berkeley. OMG, just look at that list. I even got to give a commencement speech at the department commencement ceremony. And I won the prestigious and coveted P.D. Soros Fellowship for Graduate School. There was a lot of press coverage, from Berkeley News, to New York Times, to Forbes. I'm holding up the New York Times in the photo. All this appreciation felt nice, yet overwhelming, and surreal, all at the same time. At the end of the day, these acknowledgments and opportunities are like encouraging pats on my back that seem to say, young man, you seem to be doing some good stuff. That I must be going in the right direction. And it encourages me to take more steps. Outside of academia, I get to add more pebbles through various organizations. I serve as a non-federal member of the Interagency Autism Coordinating Committee, which guides federal policy around autism. I'm also involved on the boards or advisory boards of various organizations, like DREDF Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund, Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, Autism Society of America, INSAR, Duke's University's Autism Center for Excellence, the Brain Foundation etc. plus some interesting ad hoc projects too. Like I was a creative consultant for a Netflix animated series and a Netflix movie. I am both excited and nervous about the current door of opportunity as a PhD neuroscience student. Transitions and autism are not the best of bedfellows. I'm still on unsteady ground. But as the Bhagavad Gita explains, change is the only constant in our lives. I am better off focusing on the action, the sure, and not the results, the unsure. Inaction is not an option. My hope for this next stage of my educational journey. From others I hope for kindness, compassion, patience and empathy. From me, I hope there is endless curiosity and positive action so I can continue to learn and add to knowledge and change. My first lab rotation during the fall semester was in Professor Blythe Corbett-Sent's lab, Social Emotional Endocrine Laboratory. A research project I worked on was looking at the impact of the co-occurrence of ADHD on pubertal developmental in autistics. My own research focus in grad school will be with these 2 labs, in the sensory area, with Professor Carissa Cassie, and Professor Mark Wallace. Hoping to add more small pebbles in the research arena. And I'm a NEAS Fellow of the Frist Center for Autism and Innovation at Vanderbilt. NEAS expands to neurodiversity-inspired science and engineering. I admire the talents, innovation and creativity in the neurodiversity community. I would like to see those talents channeled into finding real solutions for the more impacted autistics. There is a lot of work that needs to be done on many fronts. Perhaps finding solutions can be a potential source of employment, and we help ease the neurodiversity employment problem this way as well. In turn, solutions make it easier for the rest of us to access the employment space too. It can be a win-win for all. This is a great segue into intersectionality. This was a big theme in the autism class I taught in my undergrad at UC Berkeley. It's a huge topic worthy of weeks of discussion. Today I will try to summarize some of the key points. The term intersectionality was coined into Black feminist theory by Kimberly Crenshaw, to describe the unique way racism and sexism affect Black women. At its heart, it's about power structures built into our society that favor one group over another. Each of us has intersectionality with many things, some examples being race, socioeconomic status, gender, sexuality, language, culture, class, educational and age. What does it translate to? Life looks different depending on what kind of power structures you face. It's not a competition. It's not oppression Olympics. It's not about who has it better or who has it the worst. It's about what you are dealing with that affects your quality of life. Why is talking about autism and intersectionality important? Does it even apply to autism? This paradigm totally applies to autism and neurodiversity. And I want to take this a step further by reminding you that autism itself is not quite the linear spectrum that one is made to believe. A non-linear spectrum translates to meaning that each of us is going to be permutations and combinations of different strengths and challenges which affect us in many areas and in varying degrees in each area. Social awareness, social communication, spoken language, pragmatic language, emotional connectivity, neuromotor control of body movements, sensory processing, executive functioning, monotropic mindset, compulsive repetitive behaviors etc. So now we are talking about is the intersections of disability and its relations in power oppressions, domination, discrimination, or relations of identities, or a mix of all of the above. For autistics, bottom line of these intersections is that it impacts who gets to be part of the conversations, who gets access to spaces, funding, and resources. I think you will all agree that these are pretty serious consequences. Let's look at some examples. Let's look at intersectionality of autism and gender. Given that the traditional face of autism has been the cisgender white male, what are some of the issues that female autistics deal with that are different from the traditional face of autism? Think of the diagnostic disparity to start with. Why is there a diagnostic disparity? And what can be done? How does sexuality factor into this? Autism and immigrants. Think lack of knowledge of with existing systems, language barriers, and lack of family supports in an unfamiliar country. Now look at autism and socioeconomic status. How does lower SES affect autistics? Think resources, intervention and education. Now look at autism and race. For instance, how does the medical system treat autistics who are Black or brown? How does law enforcement treat BIPOC autistics? Think disability to prison pipeline. Important disparities exist in each of these areas, which may be the result of differences in help-seeking, advocacy and support, and the behavior of the people at the other end. Remember, we want to be inclusive, which means inclusive of all. So next, I will play a video which was actually made a few years ago, that highlights my message around belonging.
I want to talk to you about inclusion and belonging for people with disabilities. Acceptance and inclusion of disabled people into all walks of society is no doubt an important first step. But what we need goes beyond inclusion. Inclusion means just existing in the same space as non-disabled people. Disabled people need to not just be included, we need to feel we belong. Belonging is a sense of community, where you are accepted as an equal member of the group and where your life is seen as having worth. Belongingness in society is, I think, what we all yearn for at the end of the day, whether we are disabled or not. Starting today, let us all strive together towards belongingness for people with disabilities.
I do have social media, a blog and an YouTube channel. I go by the two handles on the screen. Hari310 or Autistic Neuroscientist. You are welcome to follow me or read my work. But more than just following me on social media, I would love for you to take that extra step and do some real translational action on the ground. The onus is on our generation to come up with solutions and be part of the change we want to see, because contrary to belief, currently there is no solutions, only a lot of careers and promotions and people writing books and giving talks, in the name of autism. The autism space is filled with experts who have become experts at profit-making and getting famous, but have little real solutions for autistics. So I'm going to end my talk with this little practical spiel on experts. Thank you for listening to me.
Myth of the autism expert. Dear disabled peers, no one is an expert on you. No one knows enough about autism or disability to be an expert. Even the experts are still your name. So no one gets final say on what your limitation needs and capabilities are.
Let us not just ask for a seat at the table, but work to redefine the table itself. Thank you.